Hello and welcome to week 6 of our revision videos. What a week it's been. We're nearly there in terms of half term, just one more week to go, but I'm really proud of how all of you have been working across all 3 year groups this week. In year 9 we've looked at Karl Marx mostly. Last sociology we looked at before our assessment. As you can see down the left hand side there are all the different quotes from Karl Marx, and here's where you do a bit of English cross-curricular skills here, looking at the different language he uses, the key terms, the imagery of chains and slavery and comparisons that Marx makes for the workers and what he calls the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, the ruling class. So we looked at how Karl Marx sees the class struggle in society, sees it in terms of those who own production, those who own the factories, the way to make money, and those who work for them to make them rich. We brought in the idea of Max Weber criticising Marx and looking at how Marx, his work doesn't go far enough in the eyes of Max Weber, and we'll look at Weber in detail next week. You then all had your assessments today, which was really successful. A lot of you seem to do very well and say that you found it fairly easy, which is good. It shows that you've been revising and working hard. So well done everyone. I look forward to going through the data, looking through the results and seeing how everyone's progressed. In year 10 this week we did a bit of exam practice, so you had these 4 key questions, all 4 markers, and you had a sticker in your book with this type of thing on, a summary of the different views, the internal and external factors of education, and a textbook page for you to look up. You then answered those questions in full. A little bit of extra time rather than exam timing, more to try and develop your responses. Some of those you will see across our social media. We've got some photos of really good work. There was some excellent, not just in terms of getting 4 out of 4, but the actual depth of answer, and some of the keywords you were using was phenomenal. So really happy with that. Again, think about as well, a lot of these questions in the 4 markers, they're asking for one thing. So it's a lot of detail there for one question, and if you need any help with that, please refer back to my exam technique videos, also on my channel. I'll link those in the comments or in the description, hopefully. Here's the example of the model answer for that same question. So we had 4 of these, and look at the technique we discussed. So here I've color-coded key terms in the question, and then I've color-coded where they fit into the answer. So notice I start by rewording the question, so all of those 3 colors are there, those 3 key terms are there, with a little bit of context in terms of social inequality. That was what I picked. Then I give evidence, and I talk about the evidence in terms of the influence, so they're all green. Here's how social inequality influences educational achievement. So I talk about resources, the school, and whatever help they might get. Then I go into how it gives them an advantage, or doesn't give them an advantage, in terms of access to resources. So that builds it in, that explains it. We built on the evidence. And then I'm really coming in, I've talked about the influence aspect of the question in real detail. Then we're coming back to the key focus of material deprivation. I just use the word deprived, I don't make it any fancier than that. And I talk about achievement in terms of negative achievement and how that links to peers, and that's a full peel, and that's a really tip-top 4-mark question, 4-mark answer that will can show you the depth you can go into on these. Obviously in the real exams you're pushed for 4 minutes of time. I wouldn't expect everyone to write in this much depth and detail and get 4 out of 4 in every question. I hope you do, but this is an example of what can be done in that time and how, and it's more about the technique here. Look very carefully at what's color-coded and how it's color-coded and why. Social mobility was our first topic this week for year 11, and here you can see vertical mobility, intragenerational mobility, and intergenerational mobility. And we looked at how we can split social mobility into these 3 areas and how they're very similar and overlap in many ways. So you're all happy with vertical mobility, that's fairly straightforward. Intragenerational mobility, remember I used the examples of myself and my fellow teachers, getting our degrees, coming from working class families and now being in what's considered a middle class job such as teaching. That's intragenerational mobility. And then intergenerational talked about how myself, my wife, all of our colleagues within teaching as well, although obviously she's not in teaching, all coming from working class backgrounds, and the way education facilitated that social mobility. So that's one example, and education is a really good example whenever you get a question on social mobility. We looked at as well the American Dream and Merton, and how that links to Anime too, which we'll come on to next. You may be wondering, we then moved on to poverty, and I showed you these two statistics: 1 in 4 children in poverty, 1 in 5 working people in poverty, and we talked about how the rates can be uneven, and now we have to be very careful with these statistics and who those statistics include and who they exclude. So obviously in the case of children, it's anyone under the age of 18, working people, anyone on benefits, anyone who's retired, anyone who doesn't work, such as children, wouldn't be included. So what that really means and how that's measured. We discussed the ideas of Townsend and the way the government can measure poverty versus relative poverty, absolute poverty, etc., etc. And then you wrote first drafts of your essay as to how accurate official statistics were in measuring poverty. We had some really, really good ideas there. So we picked apart 2 articles, shared our ideas, and the way you guys picked that up, I was really proud of the effort you put in. Some of the ideas that people said, I'm looking forward to reading in these essays and redrafting next week. But this sense of poverty being more than just the money you earn, it's that the houses you live in, the access to healthcare, education, the cost of living, and how that can change, was really, really astute and very, very impressive at GCSE. So keep that up. It's been a really long week. Thank you to all of you who have handed in homework, who've gone the extra mile, who have really put effort into the lessons. It's been successful right across the 3 year groups. So I look forward next week to finishing off the half term. As always, any questions, please leave them under the video. Please leave me questions on the classroom, or see me in school for any help that you need. Thank you.